Now onto one of the most important aspects of photography, shot composition. Shot composition is the make it or break it between professionalism and amateur hour. You could take the trip of a lifetime and tell your subject to go stand in front of a landscape so beautiful it could be a MacBook screensaver, and take a photo that even your mother wouldn't want to hang on the fridge. This is because it wasn't taken with proper shot composition. So, what is shot composition? Well, first, let's start with a shot. A shot is just a frame arranged with objects and shapes to make up a composition. So shot composition is just arranging these objects and shapes with purpose. Let's face it, humans are impatient creatures. In the first quarter second that our eyes look at a picture, we subconsciously gather the most important parts of that image before our brains even have time to catch up. So when you look at an uncomposed image, your eyes take too long to find the subject, thus judging the photo as bad. When you look at a composed image, your eyes take less time to find the subject and gather the information, thus saving your brain time. Your brain likes this. This is why learning about shot composition is so important, because it helps guide the viewer's eyes through the image as quickly as possible. So, with that being said, here are 4 basic types of shot composition I want you to commit to memory. Head on to the next lesson to find out. Number 1, perspective. You can use different angles to change the feeling of any shot. If there's a shot that you want, but the first attempt was kind of iffy, then a simple change of perspective may get you what you're looking for. There's 4 basic types of perspective: low angle, high angle, lateral movement, and first person POV. Low angle brings the viewer back to a child's perspective. The world seems so much bigger, and your subject is much more superior at this angle. This angle is achieved by simply being lower to the ground than your subject and shooting up at it. Take this city, for example. The lower that you shoot, the bigger the city looks. Typically, when we look up to something, we value it highly. The same goes for photography. Next, high angle. High angle can make your subject appear smaller and increase depth in your image. Try getting above your subject and shooting down at it. It can also make your subject appear inferior, so keep this in mind. Next, lateral movement. This is basically moving from left to right on a lateral plane, or right to left. Take this for example. 3 different images of a road taken at 3 different positions on a lateral plane. You can position the camera on the right, left, or the center, and anywhere in between to change the viewer's perspective. Try out different lateral positions while photographing a subject and see which angle you like most. And first person POV. POV stands for point of view. First person point of view shots are great because it places the viewer in the eyes of the photographer. It creates realism by placing arms or legs in the shot. You can get a wide angle POV shot like this by using the pano trick that I talked about earlier, or a wide angle on a newer iPhone. Number 2 is vantage point. This is one of the most helpful concepts for photographers to find great photos everywhere they look. A vantage point is a point of focus created by leading lines. Your eyes like to be guided, so we use lines in everyday life to steer or lead the viewer to a single point. These lines can be found in almost anything: buildings, streets, trees, mountains, water, and plenty more. These lines begin at the outside of the frame and travel inward to a single point. There are 2 different types of leading lines. There's geometric and organic. Geometric lines are found in streets and buildings. They're straight and much more obvious to follow. Organic lines are often found in nature, such as mountains, rivers, pathways, trees, or even reflections on the water. They tend to bend and curve much more than geometric lines, but always lead to a specific area. These lines can simply be the contrast between light and shadow, or between colors, like a green mountain against a blue sky. Here's a good example of geometric leading lines to one vantage point. Here's an example of organic. And lastly, this one doesn't use exact lines, but rather the bottoms of the trees all line up to lead to a single spot. Number 3, rule of thirds. Rule of thirds was created by John Thomas Smith back in 1797 when he wrote his book on remarks of rural scenery. And it's actually less of a rule and more of a guideline. So this old guy staring at cows and tall grass had a point though. Rule of thirds is the act of separating your frame into 9 parts, but most importantly, 3 different columns. And between those columns are 2 different lines. So you can place a subject on the left line or the right line to draw attention to the composition as a whole rather than one single centered point of focus. This is often done by placing a person on either side of the foreground and placing another subject on the opposite side in the background, such as a mountain or a lake or a building or a sunset. This is where the grid function comes in handy on your iPhone. Check out this image, for example. If the girl were in the center, your eyes would immediately go straight to her. But since she's positioned on the left third of the frame, your eyes now focus on the entire image, girl and background together. Neither angle is wrong, but the rule of thirds gives you the option to include the background as a second subject in the scene. If you're taking a picture with a human subject like this one, rule of thirds is also great because it gives you a wider picture of what the subject is looking at. It tells a story, which we're going to talk about later. Last but not least, dead space. This is a good way to capitalize on a great photo with minimal searching. Dead space is considered any space behind a subject that does not have other elements to distract the viewer from the subject. Use it to highlight a single subject with nothing more than a wide open area. This is achieved best with backgrounds that are very far away or empty or have one general tone of color. And you can use rule of thirds with dead space to mix things up and bring a little more tension into your shot. Okay, welcome to quiz number 2 for shot composition. For this, I'm going to be showing you a series of images, and all you have to do is hit B on your keyboard and tell me what types of shot compositions you see in each of these images. And I'll be going over the answers right after and drawing on the screen to make it as clear as possible. Alright, let's get started. Okay, first image. What type of shot composition do you see in this? So this one is vantage point. It's got geometric lines on the railings, as well as the boardwalk, that all point towards the center. And there doesn't have to be a subject in the center, just as long as it all leads to one specific area. Okay, example number 2. What types of shot composition do you see in this? Okay, so this one is low angle because we're looking up at the trees, up into the sky, as well as vantage point. There's geometric lines in all the trees. They all point towards the center. They don't need to end at one single point, as long as they all point towards a specific area, which these do. And they're pretty straight, so I'd call this one geometric. Alright, example number 3. What do you see in this one? So this one is just simply dead space. We've got one single subject, which is my friend Alex. I took this out in Peru. And you've got all this empty area around him. It doesn't matter that the sky is blue and the ground is orange, just as long as the whole background is empty and there's nothing distracting you from the single subject. All right, example number 4. What types of shot composition do you see in this? Okay, so this one is obviously dead space. We've got the single subject. And this one is also organic vantage point. So we've got these leading lines that come down the mountain towards our subject. Same with right over here. And there's even these lines in the ice that subtly point towards the subject. These lines in the ice may not have been planned, but with a little bit of lateral movement, left and right, you can get these lines to point towards your subject, which I think this photographer definitely did. All right, example number 5. What do you see in this one? All right, so this one is first-person POV. Obviously, you've got the legs in the shot. It kind of seems as though we're looking through the eyes of this photographer. It's also a high angle. So we're looking down towards the water and at his feet, as well as dead space. We've got all this dead space around that's not distracting us from anything other than his feet. All right, example number 6. What types of shot composition do you see here? So this one is purely vantage point, and it's got organic lines that come off of the mountain down towards the center, also here, as well as the reflections in the water. And again on this side, they all come down towards the center, and these reflections as well. And again, there doesn't have to be a subject in the center as long as your eyes lead to one specific area. All right, for the last example, what do you see here? So for this one, we've obviously got a low angle, because we're looking up at the girl from low towards the ground. We've got dead space all around the girl, so there's nothing distracting us from her and her balloon. And I'd also call this one rule of thirds, because when you split the frame, she is more in line with the right third of the frame, and her balloon is on the left. So you're looking at the composition as a whole rather than one point of focus. There isn't one point in this picture that you rest on. Your eyes kind of explore the image, but it's clear enough that I'd say it's a properly composed image. All right, that's it for quiz number 2 for shot composition. Feel free to move on to the creating depth and photography section.